Oh, gotta be serious. It's recording time.
Right. Putting on our grown-up hats. Okay, so I guess if we're officially recording, well, people are still piling in. Let's give it a couple more seconds before we officially go. All right, crew, what do we think? Yes? Okay, so hi, everybody. Welcome. Let me start sharing my screen. Put us in official mode. So you have found yourself, right, in the Leveling Up Graduate Student Research Skills session on how to develop high demand point of need resources. So thank you all so much for coming. There's lots of people I know and lots of people I don't, which is always exciting. Let's take a second and we'll just introduce ourselves. So I'm Bernadette Miro. I am the Instruction and Online Learning Librarian here at Marymount.
And I'm Hall. I'm the Instruction Access and Engagement Librarian here.
I'm Mason Young. I'm the System Librarian.
Okay, cool. So now you know us. We have a formal presentation to go through, right? And then we plan to spend the second half having a chat. But please, as we go through, right, if you have questions, you have comments, you have things that you've done that are similar, that is useful to talk about, right? Unmute yourself at any time. Speak up, throw something in the chat. Mason is volunteered to keep an eye on that for us. So if you don't want to interrupt us, but you have a question, shoot it in chat and Mason will interrupt us. And again, really, the more like chatting we do, I think the better. I like to hear myself talk, but it's not really the point, right? Okay, so let's go through it. To get started, we'll do a quick poll on what is the average age of your graduate students. So Hall, I think, is going to throw this poll link into the chat. I'm going to open the poll everywhere so that we can see it.
It is in the chat.
Oh, and it may have deactivated. So if you've got a no link, just refresh real quick. And it should be going now. Not sure. Totally viable answer. I have like a real love for the live reactions of polls now.
Oh, that's really fast.
Right? Isn't it fun?
Yeah.
Okay.
5 seconds?
Yeah, we're like a little across the board. All right, so a little more than half of us are unsure, and then we're split pretty evenly from above 34, a lot of 26 to 29-year-olds. This was just something to kind of get us going as we think about developing our materials for graduate students. It's important to consider, right, who those students actually are. One of the factors is age. Obviously, you need to consider there are other factors as you develop your materials, right? Learning preference. We could talk for 45 minutes about adult learning styles, right? But it's one of the things that we want to consider. So just a little background here at Marymount, the average age of our graduate students is 32. They're often returning after a first career, right? And Mason is going to kind of talk us through the rest of the challenges about our grad populations.
Yeah, as librarians, teaching undergraduate information literacy is challenging, but teaching graduate student challenging is even challenging. So we're just talking about some challenge we're facing as we experience the age difference between the graduate and undergraduate. So the number we have 32 years old is based on our number from our institution effectiveness. Our most graduate students, they are coming back from school, maybe already have full-time or part-time job, and they haven't do research recently. And sometimes they don't really have the technical skills to dealing with all the things that we're dealing with every day. And there's a more challenges next. Yeah, and so many of them are part-time students and working full-time. So they might attending class here and there, If you have one library instruction class, they might not be in the class for that particular day. And talk about research skills. So when we go to some class, it's really interesting. One class, when you talk about something, almost everybody know it. Then you go to another session of the same level class, and then nobody know what you are talking about. So it varies from class to class, not just from person to person. It varies from class to class. If you trying to have a one-size-fits-all teaching lessons, sometimes it crashes you. And also, we all know faculty teaching class, some of them are adjunct, some of a long time, some of just graduate from their school. So they might not know your value, how they be able to take advantage of your librarians' knowledge. So that has issues, especially teaching the graduate students. The undergraduate student, usually you have a really stable crew of teaching faculty, but graduate faculty are a little bit different. Sometimes you don't even have the time, especially for graduate students. A lot of them are online or night class or a weekend class. Are you available? So there's also the issue with that. And as one of our colleagues brought it up, another real challenge recently is there's so many online program. At the same time, there's an in-person class. So the online program, their instructors, their program chairs might not understand how the librarians can help them to do the research at all. So there's a lot of issues with the online program and how you develop lessons actually fitting also meet the requirement for the online class, at the same time also helping the in-person class. So there's a lot of issues with that. And with so many issues, and how can we develop something to make that work? Of course, the next slide is telling us, meeting all needs in one shot is not possible, especially for graduate class. How can we do that? Now, Bernadette will give us the silver bullet. Go for it.
Thank you, Mason. You like how you guys didn't know it, but I tried to talk through Mason's slides and then casually figured out those weren't my slides and tried to hand it over smoothly. So we'll see how smooth that went. These are my slides. So things to consider when we were developing what we're kind of called point of need or supplemental learning objects, right? So we had to figure out what the most obvious, right? What content do our graduate students need? How should we actually deliver that content to them? Once we figure out the content, where should that content actually live? What platform will they interact with? And how do we evaluate that content as we go through to make sure that we're being effective? So we're going to go through those kind of one by one. So to get started, to figure out what content beyond what we were seeing in the classroom, right? Because this really was a conversation between librarians going, I had this class, we had a big struggle, there was this gap, right? So we know internally what we thought the problems were, but we did an IRB survey of what should be included in a course like this or in materials like this. And we had 59 responses, right? 19 of which came from grad faculty within MU, 40 that came from outside of MU. And we distributed this anonymous online survey via listservs, Facebook posts, and internal ways that we kind of passed it along. So, oh, it's another poll. Do you want to go ahead? We'll put the link in again. It's the same link, by the way. So if you're joining late, just move past that first question. If you already answered it because you were an eager beaver, that's cool too. But you're going to go ahead and just select what you think was the #1 response by our survey participants. Again, I'm so here for the drama.
Oh, this is really interesting. It's like keep a balance of each other.
We're not quite done yet.
Oh, citations keep on the top. Now database searches catching up.
Yeah.
Just need one more person vote for something will break the tie.
I think that's a pretty good split, right? So we're split between databases and citations. is what we think. Actually, the faculty said developing a research strategy was their biggest area of concern, followed by citations, database searching, source evaluation, and just general understanding of peer-reviewed and scholarly sources, which for me was a big like, oh, that's one that I would have definitely assumed they got going in from their undergrad. But again, when you've got people that have been in the workforce for years, sometimes they may have learned that in undergrad, right? And it just didn't stick with them. Then we asked them, the next question in the survey was, right, select all the library related topics you think would be beneficial for online graduate students to improve on. And that gave us the advanced subject specific database searching, locating journal articles from citations and bibliographies, keywords, citations again, right? And how to access ebooks. And again, since this was specific, the language was specific to online, that's why it would say accessing ebooks and not probably other print materials. And then we wanted to know what methods of library instruction they would be interested in seeing for their online graduate courses, right? We gave them some options. They loved the customized LibGuide in their LMS, a tutorial that addressed a specific research need for an assignment. So again, there we're getting right into that, that's proper library instruction. A tutorial for general topics like APA or RefWorks, embedding self-guided library resource tutorials, and general kind of concept tutorials about information literacy. So a lot of our responses came back like, I will check all of these, right? They were like, we want all of the things, as long as they don't involve class time, was kind of the responses that we got basically. So if we think about it from where Marymount was coming from, what our big concerns were, our big priorities when we were breaking down how we were going to tackle creating these kind of supplemental point of need materials. We wanted to make sure, right, that our materials were accessible so that we were presenting materials in a variety of formats. And we're going to go into this in a little bit more detail in the next slide. But basically 2-minute lessons, self-guided activities, and then longer in-depth tutorials. Our priority was to cover a range of topics that were applicable to all programs. So in the previous slide, when faculty were like, we want advanced searching for our databases, that's not the kind of material we wanted to include in this, because for us, that was, then you need us to come in and really deliver this library instruction to your class. The idea behind what we were creating was these are general materials or general topics that will apply to all programs. And if you really have a specific need for your program, let's have a conversation about that. We wanted to be able to automatically enroll our graduate students into the program, right? And just so you know, we had 8 librarians that participated in this process. So when you see the timeline, that will help you kind of situate how long this might take you to do something similar at your university. And we did a lot of peer feedback and a lot of revision as a group together. Yay, so poll time. So where does most of your graduate student-facing content live? So this is an open-ended question as we go through. We're going to talk to you about where we put ours and what worked and what didn't work. But let's see. So your graduate-facing content lives on your website. Not surprising. It's a good place for it, right? I shall maybe refresh.
Website could mean a lot different things. Website, I guess, over here.
Mason, as the person in charge of our website, is like more specifically where subject lib guides, sure. Oh, YouTube, I like it.
Oh, nice.
Website research, librarian facilitated instructions. I have never done an open-ended question like this, and I love how it comes through. Oh, I like it. There you go, Mason, a specific area that's labeled for grad students. Blackboard, subject lib guides. I love that we are all like, we are all in the same boat with our tools. Oh, interesting. You have no differentiation between your undergrad content and grad, except for med and law. Another LibGuides lever.
Just curious, anybody using Wimo, that other video platform other than YouTube? No. Okay. Just checking.
No hands. Okay, so when we were thinking about it, pretty much where we put this content was one of our most important factors. But going in line, right? So how the content should be delivered. When we talk about self-guided activities, initially we launched these using the Guide on the Side platform that was previously supported by University of Arizona. It was open source, right? It was free. We like that. Unfortunately, they stopped supporting it and it had some limitations anyway. You couldn't do like a lot of quizzing. There was no opportunity for immediate feedback, which was important, right? When we're talking about our adult learning population, we want them to kind of have everything where they need it. So recently we switched to LibWizard. I could literally talk for 45 minutes about LibWizard, but anyone that wants to know about LibWizard or how you could use it, feel free to reach out to me. But what LibWizard does, right, is allow for quizzing. It gives them that immediate feedback on the quiz based on right and wrong answers. It allows us to use it as a graded assignment. If we want to pull some of this content out of where we have it, that's a really nice way to leverage it. We also have, right, 2-minute lessons. So these are videos that are 2 minutes or less, right? We create them in Camtasia because that allows us to do some interaction, right? Where we can stop and say, reflect on this or require them to click part of the screen to continue. And the in-depth tutorials are anything that's a video lesson that's 2 minutes or longer. So we did everything initially in Camtasia, and now I kind of Frankenstein the content together. So it's Camtasia, it's LibWizard, it's using VideoScribe, kind of pulling in all the tools that we have to make the videos as interesting and interactive as we can for our students. Because if you're going to jump into that 7-minute video, you should get something for it as far as I'm concerned. Oh, this is my favorite slide for the record. So this is kind of the overview of the design process. So we did the survey results that we shared with you. We launched that in spring 2018, right? Then the 8 of us formed a team to design the content, right? Everybody was like, yes, I want to be involved, which is so nice to have supportive colleagues. So what we did was break into pairs, right? Each pair took a topic. They wrote out learning objectives for their area. They did transcripts if it was going to be a video. They did storyboards, sketched out what the Guide on the Side of the self-guided activities would look like. Peer reviewed, did lots of feedback, ensured that we were staying true to our learning objectives and not kind of going out of scope for each of these activities. Then once we decided we liked all the content, we divided the development of the content based on skill level. And by that, I just mean who's familiar with using Camtasia, who can do Guide on the Side, who just wants to do more transcript work. So that will depend on what the level of your kind of working team is. But it was, I think, important for people to decide how much time they were going to commit to that. Or it can view it as a nice kind of professional development opportunity. People that had never worked with Camtasia got a chance to use a new tool that they wouldn't have been exposed to before. So after we developed all the content, peer reviewed again, we had our student workers take a look at it. Their feedback is always super helpful. And then we launched it as a module in Canvas in August of 2018. And I'll show you a little bit further down the line what that kind of looks like. Spoiler alert, it did not go well as a module in Canvas. So we redesigned it and launched it as a course, a standalone course in Canvas in June 2019. That was much more successful. We then surveyed our actual graduate students in December to see how satisfied they were with the content. Did they like longer tutorials, shorter tutorials? What was missing? What would they like to see added in the future? So that was December. So with December 2019, and then over the summer, over the course of the next year, we implemented that feedback, added some content, changed some things based on what they said. And then just recently this spring, we kind of, when we converted from Guide on the Side to LibWizard, and we redesigned essentially the whole interface, which students did not ask for, but I did because it needed a sprucing up, as you will see when we get there. Any questions so far? this has been a bit of content. We went through like the kind of tools and the overview process before I continue to plow through. Mason, you're looking at chat. I'm not.
John has a question. Why did the module not work?
We're going to get there. We are going to get there. When I show it to you, I think you will probably understand more why it didn't work. All right, so that's the only question. Then we're going to get to that in a second.
So far.
Okay, cool. Let's move to that then. So this is where it was, right? So this is what it looked like as a module. And so we use Canvas, right? Canvas as a shared content collection. I'm actually going to stop sharing for a second and let you see what it looks like. So essentially what faculty had to do was log into their Canvas, go to this shared content collection, find this module, and then import it into their course, right? And you can see Canvas was not this fancy when we were doing this. There was not like a direct link option, so they had to kind of search for it. And here, now you can see what's included in the module as a breakdown, but this actually wasn't something that Canvas used to show. So faculty weren't 100% sure what was in it as content to begin with. Plus they had all these steps that they had to go through to get to it. You can see up here, right? It was downloaded 56 times, which is not terrible, but not the audience that we were hoping to reach with this tutorial. So John, does that answer your question? Is that sufficient? Do you want to talk more about why it failed? Because we can. Hearing none. Okay, so that's the original layout of this module. We just weren't happy with the amount of time and library and hours that we put into it. We wanted to reach a bigger audience. So we made the switch from a module they had to import to this kind of standalone Canvas course. So what was nice about this is it's non-intrusive to faculty, right? They don't have to do anything. They didn't have to go through that, find it, and upload it into their course. I say we, but really Mason enrolls all graduate students in this course every semester. I can say on his behalf, that's not a fun part of this process. And we wish we could automate that a bit more, but it's not the end of the world. Also, students are already in Canvas, right? They're familiar with it. They have to go there for their coursework, so it's where they already are. And having a standalone course allowed us to push out announcements. So we were essentially able to communicate with this student population in a way that we never have been able to before. So there's a little screenshot of what it used to look like there, but essentially this is what the homepage used to look like. This video is actually an added part based on student feedback because they were like, what is this course I'm in? But you can see we divided the content, right? Introduction to the library, locating resources, citation help, technology help. And if you click through, it's going to bring you to a bunch of different resources for each of those things. So that was kind of the second iteration of this course as it stood. So after we launched, as you saw on the timeline, right, then we actually asked our students for feedback. It was overwhelmingly positive. That's no surprise, our students are very polite, right? But 75% of the students who had viewed the course reported being satisfied or very satisfied with the results. As far as how they wanted the content delivered, they preferred the 2-minute lessons, followed by the self-guided activities. Third place was the longer in-depth tutorials. And then the fourth option was written content. So there are a few areas where it's just straight up written content. Mostly those are citation words. No way to make that sexy. It is what it is. So the feedback that they gave us, students who responded to the survey but said that they hadn't viewed any of the course material said that they didn't use the course material because they didn't know what it was, right? They were just kind of enrolled in this course and they didn't understand why or when they would use this content. Their teaching faculty hadn't directed them to use any of the content in the course, or they flat out were like, oh, I got this survey, but I didn't even know I was enrolled in the course. So that was helpful for us to think about how do we reach this population a little bit better. So two of the things that we did, right, that kind of welcome video that I pointed out on the homepage, that was just a 1-minute video. It's like, you're in this class. basically because we have heard from you that you are missing some skills, right? And this is a point of need resource to just help you on your journey as you become better researchers. And then we posted this image on all the graduate level research guides. So we're embedded in their Canvas course. So they would see this image and it would be like, this is the library resource, essentially what they're reading right now. This is all specific to your program. This course is going to be all general information, generic how-to kind of stuff. Poll time. So poll number 4, where or how do you primarily interact with your graduate students? Now that we've showed you ours. Chat in the reference desk, 100%. Online research requests. I'm going to say website because you've all said that it's where you post your things, right? When you're actually in the classroom with them.
Online research appointments.
Yeah.
A lot of research appointments.
Mason has recently started doing PhD programs and he's mildly in the weeds with research appointments. Virtual reference, front desk. Yeah, I love Zoom reference. It's like the best part of the pandemic for me. All right. Well, thank you for telling us how you interact with your people. And I am going to mute myself and let Hall take over.
Yes, the reason we asked that question is because truly the success of doing something like this or just interacting with your graduate students in general is going to be just through organic embedded outreach. So we mentioned this graduate course whenever we're in front of a university audience. We have a lot of interaction at graduate orientations, and last fall, Mason and I literally just presented and showed this Canvas course, which always results in students panicking, like, can you please add me to this course? And it's like, we will, do not worry. But graduate students often also recognize the need for the library more than undergrad. So they're more likely to reach out and say, I saw this, can you please add me to this course? We've presented this at university-wide events. Maybe you have like university-wide professional development where you share. So we have something called Teaching Toolbox, and we have like innovations. And so we'll present this to faculty there, so that way they're aware of it. And we send out a newsletter that we create and tailor at the beginning of the fall, spring, and summer semesters. And so, for instance, since Bernadette revamped the graduate student Canvas course, we included that in the liaison newsletter we sent out 1 or 2 weeks ago for the summer. So continuing just like bombarding them with this, that way it's just second nature. So when students come to them, they can either be like, go to your liaison, or have you looked at the graduate student Canvas course? And also just general interactions. Almost everybody said like reference. So one of the things that surprised me was the need from professors mentioning that graduate students didn't really understand PDFs, which is why one of those options on that Canvas course was like 5 tips and tricks for PDFs. So when you're on the reference desk and a student's asking a question, you know, one of the things that you can direct them to learn more, especially if it's online and you're not working next to them, is sending them the direct link to the graduate student Canvas course and being like, here's the section on PDFs. If you want to review that, I'll be here. You can ask me questions afterwards, things like that. And it's worked, as we'll see with the next slide on, or later on with statistics.
Just bragging a little bit. Yesterday, we have a student request to enroll in the class. One of our librarians just forwarded the request. So we're really happy. It's not really we push to them. They actually come to us.
That librarian is Linda, by the way. Shout out Linda, who's in our group. And who always says, when she shows it to our nursing students, she always comes back and she's like, here's 4 people that said they weren't in it. And we're very happy to add them manually. Okay. So the product as it exists today, let's take a walk through it, because that's what I like to see when I come to presentations. I'm going to throw it in student view so that you guys are see, oh, or not. apparently I'm not allowed to look at student view. Well, this is fun. Sorry, Hangout. Let's find this. Okay, here we are. We will not put it in student view because it didn't like that. So one of the things that I am very grateful to Mason for is when I was like, I hate the look of this old page. I'm sick of looking at these graphics. I want it to be better. And he was like, yes, it could be better. It could have responsive design so that it, you know, grows and shrinks with the size of their screens. It could be listed in tabbed form so that it's more mobile friendly. And that was the kind of concept of this, was really, we know that they're doing a lot of work on tablets and phones, and how can we get it to them in a way that makes that happy? We also just kind of introduced it as different lessons. But if we take a look at one, right? So hopefully a student comes in and they're like, I know nothing about how to find library resources. I need to learn about MU Library Search. They can click through. There's a little, right? MU Library Search is where you search for, right? Books, governments, you all have this. And then depending on how many options there are for them to learn, they appear in this tab layout. So here they can click through and launch the LibWizard activity for how to do it, or if they prefer to watch the video, they can come here and watch the video or tab over for the in-depth tutorial. So depending on, not every topic has all three of these options, right? It doesn't make sense for every topic to have it. So again, that will depend on kind of what you need. For example, I know if I go to the WRLC one, it's just going to be a 2-minute, and it's not even, it's like 60 seconds on what the WRLC is and why graduate students might care about that. If you're interested in playing around in this, right, we do not keep things a secret. Just reach out and say, we want to, can you add us to it so we can check out that content, and we will be happy to do so, because again, we don't all need to recreate this content from nothing. Did I just share a blank screen? Yes, I did. Let's try that again. So that's a quick look at kind of what it looks like from the behind the scenes. Oh, Paul, is this you? Me, you, me. I'm going to mute you.
Okay. And so along with all the changes that we've made and promoting this has received almost 300,000 page views, as well as around 2,900 active users. So we automatically, well, I don't actually, but Mason has designed the system to automatically enroll graduate students once they are registered for classes and have started at Marymount. And faculty also can request access. And so our grad population, and maybe this is true at your universities as well, is actively growing, particularly more than our undergrad. So it's being used by a lot of users, and it's being viewed as well. And we were floored with the results. And so, oh, Mason, yes.
Just trying to brag in one more time. I just saw our the stats. There's one person, 20 hours in this course. One student. I just checked the first page. There's 20 hours in this course. Just one student today.
And Bernadette, we have a question from David that I think either one of us can answer, which is, I guess I'm missing something. How does what you did differ from what one might do for undergrads?
So that's a really good question. And actually a lot of our undergrad faculty are like, add my undergrads to this course. So there's, for me personally, and Hall and Mason jump in, right? When I look at this content, there's no context to it, right? So you come in here and it's not like, why should I use MU Library Search? Or if I go to citations, it's not like, why is it important to cite? How can you avoid plagiarism? It's literally like, here's the skill you need to do the thing you already know you need to do, right? So if I need to do, I'll shout out to Linda because she's here, right? If I'm in PT and I'm like, I've never done AMA citation before, right? Here's how I do it. But none of the why, none of the basic, like what I would consider, like, if we think back to the framework, none of that, why should I do this? It's literally how to do all of the things without any of the context or explanation about why you should use them. So finding the full text of an article or locating articles from citations. If I was teaching this to undergrads, I'd be like, a great source. When you find a good source, right? Go through the bibliography, find sources that are like that. You don't have to, like that's not cheating. I would give them all this context about why using citations from articles is important. For grad students, I'm like, literally, here's how you do it, right? This is how the journal finder works.
I will also say this kind of helps supplement. At Marymount, we go into every single English 101 and 102, which is so every freshman and transfer student, we see them and we can kind of orient them to the library, and that we don't have that with graduate students as well. So they're not really going to know any library search at all. Like they don't know our catalog unless they did their undergrad here. And so this can help supplement that as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Mason, do you have a thought, or are you just still unmuted?
Peter, I think I asked a follow-up or trying to clarify that is more how and less why. So
yes, perfect. Peter, that was a way more concise way to say what took me 3 minutes to get out. Yes, the how and not the why, for sure.
Yeah.
And so now we have 9 minutes. And so we have a Padlet, and I'm glad Bernadette went to the second one because that is where I would recommend us starting. So unless there's any questions in general about the presentations, we wanted to also switch gears and have more of a conversation with you. And so if you open up that Padlet, I've given an example of how, of if you've never used Padlet before, for example, how it might look. And Bernadette will open it. And so, you know, we want to have a conversation because graduate students, sometimes I feel like we also created this because we didn't want to ignore them because we give so much attention to undergrads as well. Mainly because we get to interact with them more. They're more on campus as opposed to grads. So what do you wish there was support for at your university? What is, like, do you develop content for grad students? What is keeping you from developing content? And if you've never used Padlet before, that if you just hit that plus button and you can add a comment. Oh, and what's, okay, I really like this comment. So what is keeping you, or what do you wish? Required library instruction for all students at all levels. Right now it's entirely piecemeal and what we can Kool-Aid man our way into. Yes.
I'm going to be going like, oh yeah, in my head all day now after that Kool-Aid man.
More
I just
staff.
second that one.
More staff, as we have so few in the graduate library, there isn't enough of us to do everything they deserve.
Yeah, that's so true. Part of the reason we're doing this kind of online stuff, basically just saying, if we cannot go to the class, and then there is something at least works for you to do. So.
And when Bernadette said 8 librarians helped create this, that was all the librarians we had. Everybody participated. Now we currently have 5. So we completely understand.
We need to erase that lines of conversation.
It is what it is, right? Like we would be, if we were trying to do this right now, it would be much harder. We also did most of the content development right over the summer where we have less of a teaching load and more time to kind of work, collaborate. But yeah, many hands, light work.
Yes, definitely would recommend summer. Yes, our graduate programs keep growing. We do need resources, which includes librarians. Grad programs are what's growing right now.
Oh my God. I don't know who just wrote that last one, but yes.
Yes, I do wish for every other unit to perform admirably so we could stop plugging holes and can just do our thing. Putting out fires.
We usually just say we are the fire rescue.
A better connection from the library resources to fully asynchronous students.
Yeah.
I will say, so in that kind of better connection, one of the things that I really like about the Wizard is that like real-time feedback. And what we did was constantly be like, if you got the question wrong, it was like, did you not understand this? Here's who you can reach out to, right? That can help you with this. So anytime that we can try to build that bridge, that's like, we know you're alone, right? We know you're probably doing this homework at 11 o'clock on Saturday night and none of us are here, but like, we can help you via email or we can set up a time. The amount of graduate research appointments I have taken on people's lunch breaks, right? Like at their Starbucks around the corner. Just trying to let them know that we get it and that it's hard and we can help them.
And then we have one more Padlet. Well, we had actually a couple more, but this last one too, which is why we wanted to present at particularly this venue.
Sorry, which one do you want me to load, Hall?
This one. How can we share or leverage what we're all doing so we don't either reinvent the wheel or things like that. Like we all have grad programs within the WRLC. And we all have very similar concerns as mentioned in the last Padlet. So what can we do with each other?
I will throw something out first. Like, anyone have a statistician style for mechanical engineer student, graduate student? We are really weak on that, and like the statistician style guide for those are things we don't have, and if we can borrow from other people, that would be wonderful.
A listserv, yes. A shared drive to dump our Word documents in. That way you can just cut and paste what we want to adapt OER style. That's a great idea.
We are a Google campus. We are totally using the Google shared drive, but I'm not sure all the library have that. If not, maybe WRC can help out to build up some kind of system can work out. Is Joel here or?
And we also have a question in the chat. I'm just curious if we've attempted to do any kind of assessment on the tutorials besides view counts.
So at the end of each, I'm just going to pick one at random and hope that I didn't screw it up, right? So there's a feedback option at the end of each tutorial. There's a link that goes when they do the self-assessments that asks them to kind of, it's a very basic, right? Just goes to Google, rate the effectiveness of this, give us any feedback. That's basically between that and the IRB survey that we did initially to see how satisfied they were with the content. That's the extent of the assessment that we've done to date. Unless I'm forgetting something that somebody else wants to mention.
Aside just from, I don't know if y'all use your student employees, but we mentioned that a couple of times, like we send this out to our circulation student employees and we have 2 graduate assistants and they provide great feedback. And our student employees are actually usually undergrad. So getting that perspective on a graduate tutorials as well as the GAs has been really, oh, we wish we had student employees. I'm sorry. Ours is significantly reduced, but.
Yeah.
I'll second that from Hull. The amount of times that students will be like, why did you say that word? And you're like, damn, here we thought we pure checked each other for jargon and like we avoided all the things. It's still like you never catch it all, right? Because we speak the same language. So the student feedback has been really helpful.
And then we have 2 minutes. And I want to be respectful of that because I know there's other presentations. Are there any other questions or?
So I will say, as we wait for questions, right, one of the things that we're super interested in doing here at Marymount, right, is partnering with you guys, right, that have grad populations to maybe do a new IRB survey that would reach a broader audience to find out what they need and how they would like to see that content delivered. If you're one of the people that wrote like, we wish we had a way to put this all together in one place, like let's make that happen, right? The WLC just did get a bunch of that funding, right, for OER support. I don't see why there's any reason that some of that could not be an internal system where we can create some easy metadata and put things up for it to be shared, or like we host a lot of our videos on our server. Like I'd be happy to let other people use any of that content. So if that's something you're interested in and you want to kind of collaborate across universities, reach out to any of the three of us or anybody that you like at Marymount or know at Marymount, right? We'd be happy to chat and move forward on that front. Thank you, Hannah.
The poster about great to have all the WRC universities have a supportive graduate course. I don't know if all of us have a Canvas course right now. I hope everybody using the same platform, but probably not. Yeah, but that could be a really cool to see if there's anything WRC can help us to come up with a system to do something together. Or at least an interest group for people got together.
Yeah, and Hannah's saying we put a call out to the WRLC. Yeah, I think that's a great next step. And maybe a good excuse to poke the Instruction Institutes group and leverage that audience.
All right, we are at time. Thank you all so much for attending today. And thank you to my fellow colleagues for presenting.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye.